guys, it's Fluffykins here, and welcome back to a different kind of video for fluffyween. I wanted to do this last year, but I didn't have any idea on how or what content to put behind this. So I always clean out my closet fully 100%. I take down all my clothes, everything off the shelf, and I basically empty the closet out and I clean it out completely. This is a process, it takes all day. I wanted to make some content with it, so I thought I'm going to read some public domain horror stories for you while you watch me clean out my closet. I call this fall cleaning. It's like spring cleaning, except it's fall. I'm talking a little weird because I'm trying to make like a spooky mood. You know what I mean? And I've got a microphone on my face. So let's start with some public domain horror stories that I think are interesting sounding. This story is from Louisa Baldwin, sorry. This one is called How We Left the Hotel. This one's a little long, but that's good. This is an old horror story. If there's anything that's problematic, I will not read it. I will skip over it. But here we go. I used to work the passenger lift in the Empire Hotel. The big block of building in line of red and white bricks like streaky bacon that stands at the corner of Blank Street. I'd served my time in the army and have gotten my discharge with good conduct stripes. However, I got the job was this way. The hotel was a big company, afraid with a manor committee of retired officers and such like gentlemen with a bit o' money in the corner and nothing but to fidget about it. And my late colonel was one of them. He was a good-tempered man, and never stepped when wasn't what? He was a good-tempered a man as ever, stepped when his will wasn't crossed. And when I asked him for a job, Mole, said he, you're the very man to work the lift at our big hotel. Soldiers are civil and businesslike, and the public will like 'em. Only second best sailors. We had to give our last man the sack, and you can take his place. I liked my work well enough, and my pay, and kept me in place a year. And I should have been there if it hadn't been for a circumstance. But don't let me anticipate. Ours will be hydraulic lift. None of 'em rickety things swung up like the pole parrot's cage in a well staircase that I shouldn't care to trust my neck to. It ran as smooth as oil. A child might have worked it, and safe as standing on the ground, instead of being stuck full of advertisements like an omnibus. We'd miners in it. As the ladies would look at themselves and pat their hair and set their mouths when I was taking 'em downstairs dressed for an evening. It was a little sitting room with 8 velvet cushions to sit down on, and you'd nothing to do but get into it, and it'd float you up, float you down, light as a bird. All the visitors used to lift one time or another, going up or coming down. Some of them were French, and called the lift the assessor, and good enough for them in their language, no doubt. But why the Americans? The ones that could speak English, why did they choose and always find out ways of doing things quicker than other folks? Should waste time and breathe, calling a lift an elevator. I can't make it out. I was in charge of the lift from noon till midnight. But that time the theater and dining out folks had come in, and anyone returning late, walking upstairs for my day's work was done. One of the porters worked the lift till I come on duty in the morning. But before 12 there was nothing particular going on, and not much till after 2 o'clock. Then it was pretty hot working with visitors going up and down constantly, and the electric bell ringing you from one floor to another, like a house on fire. Then came a quiet spell while dinner was on. I'd sat down comfortably in the lift and read my paper. Only I mustn't smoke, but nobody else might either, and I had to ask a gentleman to please not smoke in it. It was against the rules. I hadn't so often to tell English gentlemen that they're not like Ferdinand's. They seem as if their cigars were glued to their lips. I always noticed faces as folks got into the lift. I've got sharp sight and a good memory, and none of the visitors needed to tell me twice where to take them. I knew them, and I knew their floor, as well as they knew themselves. It was November that Colonel came to the Empire Hotel. I noticed him particularly because you can't see at once that he was a soldier. He was tall, thin, maybe about 50, with a hawk-eye nose, keen eyes, and a grey moustache, and walked stiff from a gun-shoot wound in the knee. But what I noticed was most was the scar across the right of his face. As he got into the lift to go to his room on the 4th floor, I thought what a difference there was among us officers. Colonel put me in mind of a telegraph post from height and thinness, and my old colonel was like a barrel in a uniform, but a brave soldier and a gentleman all the same. Colonel room was 1210, just opposite the glass floor leading to the lift, and every time I stopped on the 4th floor, number 1210 stared me in the face. The colonel used to go up to the lift every day, regularly, though he never came down until... But I'm coming to the precise sometimes when he was alone in the lift, he'd speak to me. He'd ask me what regiment I served, and he'd tell the officer in it, but I can't say he was comfortable to talk to. There was something standoffish about him, and he always seemed deep in his own thoughts. He never sat down in the lift. Whether it was empty or full, he stood bolt right up under the lamp, where the light fell on his pale face and scratched cheek. One day in February, I didn't take the colonel up in the lift, and he was regular as clockwork, I noticed, but I supposed he'd gotten away for a few days. And I thought no more about it. Whether I stopped on the 4th floor of the 1210 was shut, and he often left it open. I made sure that the colonel was away, and at the end of the week I had a chambermaid say that Colonel was ill. So, thinks I, that's why he hadn't been in the lift lately. It was Tuesday night, and I had an uncommonly busy time of it. It was one stream of traffic up and down, so it went on the whole evening. It was a strike of midnight, and I was able to put on the light in the lift and lock the door, and leave the key in the office for the man in the morning. When the electric bell rang up sharply, I looked at the dial and saw it was wanted for the 4th floor. It struck 12 as I stepped into the lift. As past the 2nd and 3rd floors, I wondered who it was, who had rung so late, and I thought it must be a stranger that didn't know the rule for the house. But when I stopped on the 4th floor and flung open the door and the lift, Colonel was standing there wrapped in a military cloak. The door of his room was shut behind him, for I read the number on it, and I thought he was ill in bed. I'll make enough he looked, and ill enough he looked, but he had his hat on, and what could a man have been doing in bed 10 days without in a winter midnight? I didn't think he saw me, but when I set the lift in motion, I looked at him under the lamp, with the shadow of his hat hiding his eyes, and the light of a full on the lower part of his face. There was a deadly pale. The scar on his cheek was still paler. "Glad to see you're better, sir," said I, but he said nothing. I didn't like to look at him again. He stood like a statue with his cloak about him, and I was downright glad when I opened the door to the lift for him to step out into the hall. I saluted and got out. He went past me towards the front door. "The colonel wants to go out," I said to the porter who stood staring, and he opened the door, and Colonel walked out into the snow. I can't say that sentence. "That is," said I don't like the colonel's look. He doesn't seem himself at all. He's ill enough to be in his bed, and there he goes, out on a night like this." "Anyhow, he's got a famous cloak to keep him warm. I say, supposing he's going to a fancy ball, and got the cloak to hide his dress," said the porter, laughing uneasily, for we both felt strange that we cared to say. And as we spoke, there came a loud ring to the doorbell. "No more passengers for me," I said, as I was really putting the light out this time. When Joe opened the door, two gentlemen entered new. Were doctors. One was tall, and the other was short and stout, and they both came to the lift. "Sorry, gentlemen, but it's against the rules to go to the lift after midnight." "Nonsense," said the gentleman. "It's only just past 12, and it's a matter of life and death. Take us up once to the 4th floor." And we were in the lift for a short while when we went up. And when I opened the door, they walked straight to number 10. A nurse came out to meet them, and the doctor said, "No change for the worse, I hope?" And I heard her reply, "The patient died 5 minutes ago, sir." Thought I'd no business to speak. That was more than I could stand. I followed the doctors to the door and said, "There's some mistake, gentlemen. I took the colonel down in the lift since the clock struck 12 and he went out." The scout doctor said sharply, "A case of mistaken identity? It was someone else you took for the colonel." "Begging your pardon, gentlemen, it was the colonel himself, and the night porter that I opened the front door for him knew him as well as me. He was dressed for a night like this, with his military cloak wrapped around him." "Step in and see for yourself," said the nurse. I followed the doctor into the room, and there lay Colonel, looking just as I had seen him a few minutes before. There he lay dead, as his forefathers, in great cloaks spread over the bed to keep him warm, that would feel the heat, so no cold no more. I never slept that night. I sat up with Joe, expecting every minute to hear the colonel ring the front bell. Next day, every time the bell for the lift rang, and suddenly sweat broke out of me and I shook again. I felt as bad as I did the first time when I was in action. Me and Joe told the manager all about it, and he said, "We've been dreaming." But he said, "Mind you, don't talk about it, or the house will be empty in a week." The colonel's coffin was smuggled in the house the next night. Me and the manager and the undertaker's men took it up to the lift and lay it right across it, and not an inch to spare. They carried into number 1210, and while I waited for them to come out, again feeling a strange feeling come over me. Then the doors opened softly. 4 men carried out a long coffin straight across the passage and set it down within foot towards the door of the lift. And the manager looked round at me. "I can't do it, sir," I said. "I can't take the colonel down again. I took him down at midnight yesterday. That was enough for me." "Push it in," said the manager, speaking short and sharp, and then he ran the coffin into the lift without a sound. The manager got in the last, and before he closed the door he said, "Mole, you've worked for this lift for the last time, it strikes me, and I had, for I wouldn't have stayed on the Empire's Hotel after what had happened, nor if they doubted my wages, and me and the night porter left together." That wasn't really scary now, was it? So the colonel died and his ghost left the hotel. That is spooky, but not really spooky. I've heard more spooky stuff. How interesting is that? Let's look for one more, a shorter one. That one was really long. Let's see. There are no cat stories, but let's see if we can find a short one. This one is way too long. Oh my, this one is very, very, very long. Do you guys like my narrator voice? My narrator voice is odd. I don't think I like it very much. There are no more short stories. These are very long. I love horror movies and horror stories and horror books. I think I'm desensitized to horror due to the amount of horror I've consumed. But that story was not scary. If you would like me to read another one later, in another video, I will. There's the whole Dracula story that I could read. But that doesn't seem very fun for me. I can barely read. I always mess up the words. It's funny. And there's Charles Dickens. Oh, I'd like his stories. A Christmas Carol. Isn't that the book with the 3 ghosts? That could be fun to do. For Fluffy Christmas, what do you think? I'm not sure if this is going to be a long enough narration. If not, I will record another story. But for now, anytime is gaming time. Till next time, guys. This is Fluffykins Gaming, signing out.